Welcome, Swift scholars and raconteurs of restaurant ratings. It's Professor Gallagher, and welcome back to our Snacktacular app building series. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to use the Firebase SwiftUI property wrapper to access a collection that's nested inside a document inside another collection. The way to do this isn't very obvious, but it's something most developers will want to do when working with Cloud Firestore. We're going to learn some useful techniques on how to set this up and how to prevent the PreviewProvider from crashing. And by the end of this lesson, you'll be able to save new reviews and edit restaurant reviews in the cloud. Now, this is part 1 of 2 because our app is getting a bit complicated, and the code at the end of this lesson will work fine for existing data that you have in Cloud Firestore, so make sure that you've got some spots in there. But when you add a new restaurant location, or spot as we call them, our app will crash at the end of this lesson. But we'll solve that problem and further refine our user interface in our next lesson, part 2. Let's get at that tasty buffet of big learning. So let's take a quick look at what we're going to be building in this lesson. So by the end of this lesson, the UI will still need some work, but this is all about saving and accessing a collection inside a document in Cloud Firestore. So we're going to be able to click on a restaurant, or what we've been calling a spot in this series, and if there are any reviews, we'll see them in a list below the map. Now, the average rating calculation doesn't work yet. We'll eventually set that up. If you click on a rating, you'll be able to see it. We're going to eventually modify this user interface as well so that the options to edit an existing review with save and cancel are only there if you have posted that review. If the user is not, they'll just see the back button. But for now, we just want to prove we can save the data, and we did save this, and the data is displayed in the review. We can head back, want to add a new review. You can click on Rate It. This, by the way, is inside of a header in the list view showing our ratings. So we're going to learn about headers in list views in this lesson as well. And you're going to be able to enter a star rating and a title and body for the review. And when you save it, it's going to appear in that list showing the reviews. Now, we'll eventually update these cells in the list view as well so that they show star ratings and the first line of the review body, but there are enough new concepts in what I've shown you so far to constitute a complete lesson, so let's get hacking. So last lesson we set up our review view and our star selection view subview, and we created our review struct. So now let's head over to the spot detail view so that we can add a list of reviews to the information that we show on a given spot, our name for restaurant, and we'll create a button to add a new review and head to the review view. Now first, we don't want the map taking up the whole screen since we want to enter restaurant reviews below this, so let's restrict the map height using a frame. Under map, I'll enter a .frame modifier with just the height parameter, passing in 250, and this should give us a decent amount of room. Now to display our list of reviews, we're going to use the @Firestore query SwiftUI property wrapper, and we first saw this when we displayed the list of spots in our list view. So to get access to this, we need to import FirebaseFirestoreSwift. And now here's the tricky part, and I haven't seen this explained well online, so hopefully this is useful to many watching this video. In our last lesson, we showed what our data model will look like. We don't have this set up in Firestore yet, but we're going to see this when we start to save data. So we'll have a spots collection with a document for each spot or restaurant, which we do have, but then in each spot document, you'll have the ability to have a reviews collection as well, which will store all of the documents, one for each review of that given restaurant. Now in Cloud Firestore, you write the access path to a document as an alternating string that's a collection / document name / collection, and you repeat that until you get to the path that you want. So the path that we want to get to in order to be able to read or write a document that will be the spots restaurant review is spots plural / the ID of the spot, that'll give us the document of a given spot or restaurant, / reviews plural, which is the name of the collection of restaurant review documents for that spot. So if we return to Xcode and we try to write this with @Firestore query, and we want the collection path, that's a string, and then the rest of this after the paren will be var reviews, make that with a plural, colon, and in brackets, capital R review, singular. And so the path should be this, spots / string interp, with spot.id inside the string interp, then after the string interp / and reviews with a plural. Make sure that you have spots as plural and reviews as plural. It's easy to forget to do that, and that will give you the wrong path. But this gives us an error. How come? Well, we can't refer to the variable spot and its ID property until we've initialized all of these variables that are at the struct-wide property declaration level of the struct. They're not going to be available until we get down here into the body property. So what are we going to do? Well, What I'm going to show you is a bit of a kludge, but it works. And Flowright's Code, the person who helped develop this library, told me that this was a sound approach. So we're going to put a string in here just so that we can initialize this value and create it with its property wrapper. So just for now, I'm going to put in the string spots in here as our collection path, which is not correct, but our code won't crash. Now our code isn't going to show this when it runs, but this will actually give us an error when we try to do this, because the array of review structs, which this is declared as, is not inside the spots collection, but that is totally okay. The error elegantly fails. It doesn't crash our code. Now it is going to make a call to Cloud Firestore that we don't need, but that isn't anywhere near a noticeable performance hit. So what we're going to do is we're going to reconstruct the path property in onAppear down here in the body property. Once we get down here, we are going to have access to spot.id, so we'll be able to set that up. And I'm going to put a comment up here that says the variable below does not have the right path. We'll change this in onAppear. So now down in onAppear, we can get access to the reviews variable we just created, that @Firestore property wrapper, by using a binding $sign like this, $reviews. You might sometimes hear this technique referred to as getting the projected value of a property wrapped value, but that syntax of putting a $sign in front of the property is what we want. And we can follow this with .path to get at the path property, and that's what we want to recreate. So we're going to set this equal to the string that we originally wanted, which is, in between double quotes, spots, lowercase, plural, remember, / string interp, passing in spot.id, and then finishing this off outside the string interp, / reviews, plural. Again, the standard is usually to make sure that your collection names are plural, so they should have S's at the end of them, and we'll get a gnarly crash. And when you see a crash that looks like this, it's usually a problem with the preview provider. Let me show you a workaround. Now, the preview provider isn't going to show any data in the reviews value that we create here, but we'll be able to stop the crash so that we can continue to build the user interface and see the rest of the interface in the live preview. So I'll just click on Xcode and leave the error window behind. Oh, and since spot.id can be nil, let's address this with nil coalescing following .id with double question marks, and we'll set this to an empty string. And below, it might be nice to print out the reviews.path just to see what we're getting, so I'll enter print with string reviews.path equals string interp reviews.path, and we need to have a $sign out in front of reviews to print this out properly. And so now let's address the preview provider crash. What we'll do is we'll create a variable that states if the preview is running. So up top, we'll create this with var preview running equals false. And since this is an initialized variable, we aren't required to enter it as a parameter when we set up our view, the spot detail view that we're working in right now. But we do have the option of passing this in if we want to give it the other value, the false value. So now back down here in onAppear, we'll wrap the reviews.path lines in an if statement that says if not, ! Preview running. So if the preview is not running, open and close curlies, and then we'll cut out these two lines and put them in between the curlies, because if the preview isn't running, then we won't crash the preview and we want to execute these two lines. Otherwise, if we're running in the preview, we're going to ignore these two lines because they'll crash the preview. And again, this means the preview won't have the data in the reviews array, but that's fine. We'll at least gain access to the live preview, so we can at least continue to design the rest of the interface. Now, the real neat trick is down here in PreviewProvider. Watch this. So in our call to spot detail view, after passing in our spot, which is required, we'll add comma, and then start to type preview running, and we see Xcode and code completion recognizes that this is totally legitimate to include this parameter in here. We don't need it because we've initialized it up top, but if you want to change it and override that value, you totally can. So we'll press return here, and we'll pass in true. Nice! So that when we display the live preview using this code, we'll be sure that the preview provider running variable is true, and we'll skip over the code that causes the crash. Click the resume live preview button. Crash now averted. Nifty! So now, underneath the map modifiers, which includes .change here and before the spacer, we're going to enter a list to show our reviews array, but we're also going to add a section header in here. Now, there are a few ways to do this, but let's try list, open and close curlies. Then inside those curlies, we'll type in section and select the option with content and header, and then press return to get the trailing closures. Now, note that the header actually comes above the content of the list when it's shown in the preview provider or when your app runs, but the code that we're actually writing has the header listed below the content. That's fine. Just know that your header is going to show up in the right place. Now I'm going to delete the code placeholders in both of these closures, and in the header, we're going to show a label for the average rating, followed by the average rating, a number, followed by a button to enter a restaurant review for the spot. So we'll do this in an H stack, and in between the curlies, we'll add a text view, passing in the string avg period rating, colon, and we'll set the font to title, and we'll make this bold. I think title 2 is actually a better font for this. And the reason we're not seeing the letters in both upper and lowercase letters is because of the default list style. So let's override this. Below the closing curly for the list, we'll add .listStyle, passing in .plain. So now we'll see our upper and lowercase letters. Now this is showing up sort of faded out, kind of gray, but the modifier that we can use to make this show up in black is .headerProminence. Code completion showing up a little wonky in here, but we'll pass in .increased, and that faded out gray goes away, and it shows black bold letters in upper and lowercase. Nice. And if you want, you can cut out the header prominence modifier and paste it below the section, although it doesn't really impact how things look. And then after the average rating text view, we'll put in a text view that will show the number for the average rating. Now, right now, we're going to hard code the value in here to set up how the interface will look. We'll eventually change this to a computed property that will make a calculation based on all of the restaurant review ratings that we'll see in our list. But right now, we'll just say text, passing in the string 4.5, and I'll follow this with a comment that says to do, change to a computed property. And we'll make this font.title so it's a little bit bigger than the text to the left, and we'll set .fontweight to .black, and we'll set the .foreground color to capital C color, passing in the string snack color, which is that orangish color that we created in one of our first lessons in this chapter. And then after the 4.5, I'm going to add in a spacer, followed by a button with a title and action. And the title will just be the string rate it. And for the action, I'm going to enter a comment to do, toggle here. We need to set up a toggle to show the sheet, but we need to create the variable in order to do this. And we're also going to need another sheet modifier to show the sheet that's got our review view. But before we get there, let's set up the button style to border prominent. We'll bold the button text, and to set the button color, we use .tint here. And we'll pass in capital C color, passing in the string snack color, just like we did above. And this looks good. So now let's create that Boolean value to show the sheet for the review view. So up top, we'll say @state private var show review view sheet and set this equal to false. And why don't I cut out this line and paste it below the other sheet Boolean just to keep those guys together. And then we'll get rid of our toggle to do in the button action, and we'll pass in show review view sheet .toggle. Then down below the sheet that we already created to show the place lookup view, we'll add another .sheet modifier, selecting the option with is presented and content. Is presented is a binding variable, so we'll pass in $ show review view sheet. We'll tab over to content, press return for trailing closure, and we'll enter review view, and the options here are to pass in spot and review. Spot will simply be lowercase spot. The review is going to be a brand new review with no values in this. So to create that new review, we'll say capital R review. So that creates a brand new struct. It's a struct initializer with open and close parens after this. And remember, we don't have a navigation stack inherited when we present using a sheet. We do when we use a navigation link. So we need to embed this view in a navigation stack. So I'm going to command click on the review view statement above. There's no embed in navigation stack in the quick actions menu. I'm just going to select, group is fine, but I'm going to replace the word group with navigation stack, and this will work great. Now back up in our list, let's enter some content for this section. So we're just going to put in some basic row information so that we can show the title of the review, and we'll also navigate to the review view. When we click on that row, we'll eventually add more information to show in the row, and we'll create a custom view for this. But right now we'll keep things basic just to make sure that our data is showing up with a save and a load. So between the upper curlies for the section, this is where we enter the list content for this section. So we're going to say for each, and oh, look at this. Xcode kindly suggests entering reviews and review for me. So let's select that and press return. Xcode writes out all this code for us and leaves me in the body between the curlies so I can enter the content. Now Xcode doesn't always make this recommendation via shortcuts. I find that it's pretty inconsistent, so if you don't see the shortcut in your version, just go ahead and type the code that I've got in here. And in between the curlies, we'll enter a navigation link, selecting the option with destination and label. We'll press return for trailing closure curlies. The destination link will be review view, passing in spot and review, both with lowercase variable names, since we've got a spot and we've got a review at this point. So we're clicking on a review that we see in this list. We're not creating a new review when we click on the button to show the sheet like we set up below. And now for this label, it will just be text passing in review.title, and I'll put a to-do comment stating, build a custom cell showing stars, title, and body. And we'll do that in our next lesson. So again, we're not going to see anything in the list in our live preview because we skip over that code to update our reviews array because we were crashing in the live preview, but that's okay. And now I'm going to head over to my browser because I've still got reviews in my cloud Firestore because I was demonstrating a complete version of the lesson here. I don't want those to show up. I want to start from scratch just like the data that you're viewing. So I'm going to click on the individual spots and I'm going to click on the triple dots in the review collection and delete all of those review collections for any of the spots that I entered reviews for. So now I've got no reviews, and back in Xcode, we want to create code to save our review. So we're going to create a review view model, and this is going to be almost identical to our spot view model that we created earlier. So why don't we crib from the spot view model? Let's head to that file and copy all the code inside here, then right-click on spot view model in the project navigator, select new file, create Swift file, and we'll name this review view model. Then paste in all that code that we just copied, but we need to make some changes in here. Let's change the class name to review view model, and we'll change this spot variable here to one that's named review that creates an empty review, not spot by default. And let's change the name of this function down here from save spot to save review. And now in this function, we need to pass in a spot because remember, we save a new review and it's inside of a spot document. So we need to pass that spot in here. We'll keep the spot, but after the spot, we need to access the review. So we'll put in a comma and then followed by lowercase review, uppercase R review. Now this line down here that says if let ID equals spot.id, that checks to see if a spot already exists, but we're not saving a new spot here, we're going to be saving a new review. So we'll change this to read if let ID equals review.id. So if review.id is not nil, then we're going to create this ID constant in here, and we know that we have an existing review that we're editing because we already have a review.id. And so we'll use this line here that has the set data that updates an existing document. Otherwise, we must be entering a new review because we don't yet have a .id property for the review. So we head down to the else clause where we'll use the add document statement down here. That's going to add a new document and it's going to give us a unique ID that it will also use as the document's name. And then down below, let's build up a collection string that's going to have the path that we need to access when we save data or create a new document. Now, we could enter this same code on these two lines here, but I think it's a bit easier to see what we're doing if we create a string with that path as a constant first. So right here, we'll say let collection string, lower camel case. We could call this anything we like, but collection string is a good name, as would be path string or path if you wanted to use that. Now we'll set this equal to the string spots / string interp, passing in spot.id / reviews. Again, make sure your spots is plural and your reviews is plural, but it's only spot.id inside. And then down here where it says collection, we can actually replace the string spots with this constant that we just created. So when we do this, instead of just jumping to the spots collection, we're going to jump to the spots collection, then the document inside of spot, represented by the spot.id, and then the reviews collection inside of that. We'll do the same down here, highlighting this string spots in the add document, and we'll replace that with collection string. And also remember, instead of passing in spot.dictionary, we're going to want to pass in review.dictionary in both the set data and the add document lines. And I can change the print statement to say reviews, not spots, and I'll change this string here too. And when you copy and paste code like this, sometimes it can be a little dangerous. So one of the things that I like to do is I try to find any of the values that I should be changing. So I'm going to press Command F to bring up a find box in Xcode, and I'm going to enter the word spot to make sure that any remaining references of spot have been changed in this class. So there are a couple more comments that I'll change. But that's it. So if I check again, I see the word spot is only showing up in a couple of lines here in the function definition and in the collection string line. And those are the only places that I want to refer to the spot. So this is looking good. And so now we need to call this function from our review view when we save our review. So let's head to the review view file, and I'll look for the to-do that I created when I set up a save button. I can use the jump bar for that. Again, the advantages of using to-do comments and the jump bar in Xcode. And I'll replace this comment with capital T task, and in between the curlies, we'll add the keyword await, since we're going to be calling it an async function. And oh yeah, I can't call this function because I haven't yet made an instance of the review model class in this view. So back up top, since this is the first and actually only place that we're using this observable object, we're going to create an instance with @stateObject, and we'll follow this with var review VM lower camel case equal sign, because again, we're instantiating this, so we're creating an instance of this review view model followed by parentheses. So once we've initialized the class or created an object from this class, we can now access everything inside the class, including the function that we want to get at when we refer to review VM. So then we'll head back down to that button action and we'll enter await followed by review VM dot save review. And remember, code completion reminds us this is an async function, but we've taken care of that by adding the await keyword out front. And this reminds us that this is going to be passing back a bool value too. And code completion is looking a little wonky in here. I'm going to enter review lowercase r as the value that I'm passing into the review parameter, and I'll enter spot comma in front of this. And usually when I see this wonkiness, it usually means that I didn't declare a spot, but up here I can see that I did, although as I watch this and we do the voiceover, I've noticed that I didn't do anything with the returned bool value, so we'll come back and fix that in a bit. Now at this point, if we go ahead and build and run, oh yeah, we have a warning back here in review view model. We can silence this warning by entering after spot.id a double question mark and an empty string. And again, we got this warning in here because spot.id could potentially be nil, but we fixed that possibility. But you know what? I'm going to stop this and I'm going to use a guard let statement instead so that I can print an error if I ever have problems with this statement in here. So above this, I'm going to say guard let, creating a constant equal to spot.id. So that's all one word with capital I and capital D. And we'll try to set that equal to spot.id. Else, open and close curlies and return inside. And I'm going to grab this part of the error print statement here and paste it above the return statement and change it so that it reads error spot.id equals nil. And now I'll modify the let statement down here, passing in the constant spot capital ID, not the spot.id. And I'm getting one more error in here. So when it says non-void should return a value, that's because this function is set up to return a Boolean value. So I can't just say return here. I need to put a Boolean value after this return statement. And since I've failed the guard statement in here, I should return false. Now our warnings are cleared, so we can build and run. Hammer time, no warning. And I'll tap on Pino's Pizza, and by the way, we're printing out our review.path for Pino's Pizza down in our console, so if you're curious, you can check out the console to see how the path is constructed. Remember, that happens in our onAppear statement. Now let's click on Rate to add a review, and this is my favorite pizza place, so I'm going to give it 5 stars, and the title will be It's Hip to Be Square, with the review saying, Get the Sicilian, that's a square slice, it's scrumptious. And I'll save this, and will you look at that, we see in the list Pino's Pizza now has one review, bellissimo. Now there's one thing I want to point out, and I warned you about this in our prior lesson. If we open a browser and go to the data area in our project's console, if we go to the Pino's document and look at the reviews collection, and we'll refresh the page so we see the updated data in the console, but if we look at the review, everything is in here, including the reviewer's name and the posted on time. Nice, but what are we missing? We don't have a rating value. We gave them a 5, not a 0. What gives? And by the way, we'll see the same thing if we head back to the app and click back on the review. We've got all the review data in here, but we don't have anything for the star rating. Oh yeah, remember in the prior lesson, I'd mentioned that we need to set the state variable that we used in the star selection view back to a binding variable. Now we initially used the state property wrapper because we wanted to test the interactivity in the preview provider, but now we need to make sure that we switch the property wrapper back to a binding so that we can be sure that we're going to pass back the rating value when the user clicks on the star. We're not doing that right now, so even though it looks like it works, the rating value from the star selection view is never being updated back on the review view. So to fix this, let's head back to Xcode and we'll go to the star selection view. And we'll change the @state_var rating to @binding var rating, and Xcode is slow to catching up, but it's going to need us to update in the preview provider here, passing it instead of for .constant in parentheses 4. And we've got another error up here, but I'm going to click on the error indicator and jump back to our review view. And oh yeah, now because we have a binding value in star selection view, we need to put a $sign in front of review.rating. And Xcode is grumping, but this is a bogus error. Just press the resume button in Preview Provider. Things are working. But what we really want to do is build and run in the simulator. Hammer time! No errors. Let's look at Pino's Pizza again. We'll check out our review, and let's give them the 5 stars that they deserve and tap save. And if we tap back at the review, we see all 5 stars showing up. Nice. Binding issues fixed. And if you adjust this to 4 stars and save again, then head back, we see 4 stars in here now. And also notice the messages down on the console that say, data updated successfully. We didn't allow data updating in spots once a spot was created, remember, because we didn't want anybody to change information about the spot, and that would put reviews from one spot on another spot. But here we see the update portion of our save data function is clearly working. So let's go back to the browser. We see our rating in here of 4. Everything's updating in the cloud as expected. Now we are going to want to update the interface in a bunch of different ways, including getting rid of the back button in here when a user can add or edit their own review. We're also going to recognize if a user is looking at a review that they didn't enter, and we'll make sure that they can't change somebody else's review. We'll fix that in a future lesson. But if you want to keep trying this out, we can head to another spot like Shake Shack, and we can enter a new review for them. We'll say 5 stars, great burgers near BC, take a study break, get the Smoke Shack if you like it a bit spicy. Save, we've got a Shake Shack review. Nice. This is showing up, it's in the cloud, and if we look back at the Xcode console, we can see that that Shake Shack review prints the baby chick emoji, and it says data added successfully rather than updating, showing that we were using the add document portion of our data saving function, not the set data line that we're using when we were updating the document. If you go back and look at save review, you can see that the set data update part of the if statement uses the cool emoji that we see here. So this is working great. And there's one more comment I'd like to add to our spot detail view. Down here in the if statement and on appear, the if not preview running, I'll write a comment that says, this is to prevent the preview provider error. And there's one last thing to change that I didn't set up properly the first time. It's in the save button action in the review view. So let's head over to the review view now. And down here where our toolbar code is, let's look for the button action for the save button. And remember, our save review function returns a bool value, but we don't get that value or do anything with it. So we should really get the value. We'll put let success equals in front of the await keyword here. And then we'll create an if statement below this. If success, open and close curlies, else open and close curlies, and this dismiss should really be in between the success curlies. Otherwise, if we don't have success in the else area, we'll print angry emoji, error saving data in review view. And you can build and run and add more reviews if you'd like, change those reviews. Everything's working properly. Another lesson of big learning done. Now, Swifters, I did mention that we still have a problem here. While we can add new reviews fine, you'll find that if you return to the snack spot list and then press plus to add a new spot, we get a rather glorious crash. And this has to do with the fact that our reviews are looking for a reviews document, and we don't yet have a spot ID for a brand new spot. And we'll also need to take care of some other cases. For example, we'll have to prompt the user to save a new spot before any reviews can be added to that spot. We'll learn how to deal with that, and we'll learn more about alerts and other techniques in the next lesson, so stay tuned for more of our smorgasbord of Swift.